So welcome to the peer-to-peer webinar, the 7 highly effective habits of peer-to-peer programs. On today's agenda, we're going to tell you a little bit about ourselves here at Charity Dynamics and at Kimbia. We'll briefly touch on peer-to-peer, what it's all about, how it works, and how do we define it, and why it's the talk of the town. We will then move to the 7 habits of highly effective peer-to-peer programs. And because this is a recording, there will not be a live Q&A. However, if having viewed or listened to the recording, you have any questions, feel free to email us or reach out to us. Our contact information will be at the end of this presentation. So a little bit about us. Colleen, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. My name is Colleen Legge. I'm a senior interactive consultant here with Charity Dynamics. I predominantly work in the peer-to-peer space. I've got about 13 to 14 years having worked with large organizations like the Leukemia Lymphoma Society, the Livestrong Foundation, and on this side, on the client side, I'm working with big programs like the ALS Walk to Defeat, American Cancer Society Relay for Life. I love peer-to-peer. It's how I got into this world, and excited to share this presentation with you all.
Great, thank you, Colleen. And this is Miriam Kagan. I'm a senior fundraising principal here at Kimbia, a little bit of a jack of all trades right now, focusing primarily on our peer-to-peer and giving day solutions. And prior to that, have a long history in all sorts of direct marketing for nonprofits, including direct mail and online. So, Colleen, would you like to tell us a little bit about Charity Dynamics for those that may not be familiar, although I'm pretty sure everybody has heard of Charity Dynamics and the wonderful work you guys do?
Sure. We are based out of Austin, Texas. Most of our staff actually is here in Austin, Texas. And really there's 2 things that we do. We help nonprofits leverage technology, obviously to reach more people, raise more money, drive more engagement as the industry and technology changes. And then our solutions consist of a mix of those items there, the strategic consulting, our creative design and interactive services. We have platform expertise. And then some of you on that are listening may know of our Boundless Fundraising, which is a mobile and tablet application for peer-to-peer events that help push the fundraising on those platforms. And then if you want to go to the next slide, this is just a little bit of an infographic for you all, and what we like to deliver: more awareness, supporters, engagement, and donations. This is what nonprofits need, obviously, and how does this work within peer-to-peer? That's what we're going to look at today. So Kimvia, let us know what you do.
Thanks, Colleen. So we here at Kimbia are also in Austin, Texas. We have offices around the country, and we were founded in 2007 to really focus on ensuring that nonprofits can interact with their constituents in the way that they would prefer or think is best practice, rather than having the technology define that interaction. Based on that, we have patented widget technology for all sorts of online campaigning and fundraising. And we have a very portable and scalable solution that's the best of breed and easy to integrate with any CRM. We offer the broad variety of services that you might think of in terms of how you interact with your constituents online, from online fundraising to event registration, DIY and peer-to-peer. You may have heard of us because of Giving Days, Give Local America, for example, and also custom forms. A couple of things I'm going to point out on this page. I don't like to give a big spiel, but some of the things that I personally, as a fundraiser, really like about Kimbia. One is mobile readiness. Everything in the platform is inherently mobile ready, and as we know, mobile is the platform that folks are engaging in right now, so it's important to consider that aspect of your technology. And also, I really like the multi-currency, multi-language aspect of the forms. So not only, if you're having a peer-to-peer fundraiser and perhaps you're having teams that are in, countries around the globe, not only can they see donation forms or registration forms that are in their own language, but when they do give to donate, it's possible to go ahead and do that in a local currency. So you can see all the great things that Kimbia is all about, but just wanted to point out a couple things here. So Colleen, do you want to take over this little conversation here about why peer-to-peer is important?
Sure. And peer-to-peer is important because it can do a couple of things. And if you're new to the space, you may be looking at how can we add an additional revenue channel? How can we get people to do things on our behalf? A lot of times peer-to-peer will push you to work a little smarter, not harder, because you're asking people to be advocates for you and asking for those donations. And so this just speaks to the 1 in 4, the number of emails from an online fundraiser to their network that result in a donation. And do your participants' emails have that kind of conversion rate is one question to ask yourself. And then if you really dive into peer-to-peer and about peer-to-peer, again, I always like to think of it as person to person, and that it's a method of fundraising that leverages your supporters to fundraise on your behalf. It's a really great way to get new donors and reach new networks of people. I'm even seeing more and more the clients that come through our doors. A lot of people are seeing this as the fix for the young professional generation, that magic word of how do we engage millennials. And just so you know what's out there, a recent survey that we just conducted was 66% of those surveyed currently have a peer-to-peer program, and of those that don't have one, 59% want to add one. So what is that telling us is that peer-to-peer ain't going nowhere. It is here to stay, and it's only going to grow bigger, and I think it's going to be the most creative space for fundraising for the future.
All right, so on that note, I think that we have established who we are and some of our expertise in this area, and also we could certainly go on and on about why P2P is so effective and has so many organizations jumping on board, but that's probably a whole webinar in itself. So now we're going to get to the meat of why we're all here, which are the 7 habits of highly effective peer-to-peer programs. We're going to review the 7 bullet points that you see here and how they all connect to make sure that you not only implement a successful program, but that you have the elements in place to make it successful, from planning to getting organizational constituent buy-in, setting the right benchmarks for yourself, and understanding how you're going to evaluate success. All of those things are in these bullet points that we're going to take one by one next. So the first one is be proactive, and Colleen's going to take that one.
Sure. So be proactive really just means starting from the beginning in terms of surveying your internal and external stakeholders. I'm a firm believer in that you need to choose the right platform for now and 3 years from now. I do see people in that 3 to 5 year span that maybe want to jump to something new as technology changes, but it's a big investment for an organization. So choose the right platform for now and 3 years from now, and have a launch strategy, or maybe even consider, I'm going to pilot this peer-to-peer program before I take it nationally, so that you're not like the image on the right where you take it to everybody and then you're like, it's a bold strategy, let's see if this pays off. And basically, we must own peer-to-peer before it owns us. So I can't stress enough how much the survey internal and external stakeholders is really important. And if you want to go to the next slide, I will say this, and if you just keep hitting, it's going to show all these different kinds of peer-to-peer that are in our space, where you can walk, you can do an endurance event, you can do campaign, you can do DIY fundraising. It's all right there. And so for every peer-to-peer, we need to think about how can we be proactive, how can this be successful from the beginning, and set us up for the next 6 habits.
So the next habit is begin with the end in mind. And what we mean by that is think about what the goals are and how you want to reach them. So why are you doing a peer-to-peer campaign? Are you doing so because you'd like to grow your constituent engagement? Is it because you want to try it and see if it works? Is it because you see that some of your supporters are actually engaging in these kinds of activities on other platforms, and you're saying to yourself, this would be nice for me to do by myself or as my organization, whether with a partner or with my own technology. So in order to do that, you have to set some realistic goals. So if you are you going to expect a certain percent of new donors from this peer-to-peer campaign? Are you going to expect that your peer-to-peer fundraisers raise an average of a certain dollar? So I would like to see everybody raise about $200 a participant. Are you going to expect a certain participation rate from the folks that you try to recruit? Now, you may be saying to yourself, I don't know how to decide those numbers. I have never done this before. How would I figure that out? Well, there's data out there. There's certainly resources to look at. For example, Charity Dynamics has some great benchmarking information as well as others. Or you can look at comparable programs that you have already had. Maybe a couple of years ago you launched an advocacy program and you saw that in your first year you were able to generate 30% new advocates. Well, that's not the exact same program. It's parallel enough that you should be able to say to yourself, I find that when I'm starting a new program, I expect that my new participation rates are around 30%. I'm going to try to make that a goal. Or maybe your benchmark is that you get at least half of the people who raise their hand and say that I'd like to be a fundraiser to actually raise you money. So you don't have to have exact numbers. You can put a stake in the sand to orient yourself and move forward from there. And then each year you can certainly expand your goals and say, well, last year we got 400 people to sign up. This year we'd like that to be 450. Colleen?
Yeah, great. So the next habit would be to put first things first. And that picture on the right is really what speaks to this point, is that I feel strongly about going back to the basics of peer-to-peer. When I did my first fundraising event 15 years ago, I did not have an online platform to fundraise on. I had to send out letters, I had to hassle people by phone, which totally makes me date myself a little bit, and also the fact that I sat in classrooms with these projectors at one point in time. But we have to sometimes go back to those basics and model to our participants what we want them to do with our donors. So get out and talk to your participants, your team captains, your sponsors. As amazing as the digital world is, we really don't want to hide behind it. And I recently had this example where I signed up for a walk that is not in Austin, Texas. I'm going to visit some friends, and I signed up for a walk in their area, and I thought it was really interesting that about 5 days after I signed up, I got a phone call that said, hey, we noticed your address wasn't here. We want to make sure you signed up for the right walk. And I love that. I was like, oh my gosh, you're paying attention, and you have no idea that this is what I do for a living. But I loved it that they paid attention that my address was out of state and wanting to make sure that I was connected in the right place. And so they really took it back to the basics, and it made me think that we really have to think about those even with technology growing. Miriam?
Great, thank you, Colleen. The next one is think win-win. And what we really want to emphasize here is that you have to determine not just why you think peer-to-peer would be great for your organization. Hey, we can involve more people, we can raise more money. But why will your constituents want to participate in your peer-to-peer campaign? Why will maybe your board members want to support a peer-to-peer campaign? Why will some of the mission recipients be excited about the peer-to-peer campaign? And this is where, especially for the supporter, the person that's fundraising on your behalf or donating on your behalf, you need to have a strong value proposition. It's not enough to say, well, you know the work we do, raise money for us. Why is a peer-to-peer campaign the way for these people to go? Is it because they get to tell their story personally about why they're connected to your organization? Is it because it allows them to tell more people the story about why they care about your organization because they're able to, say, do so digitally? It's all about the supporter. So you want to make it really, really easy for that person to help you. You should not have a registration screen that's 97 steps long, for example, and requires me to tell you what my favorite color was when I was 7. The harder you make it for me, it's not about you. It might be nice for you to know that color. Make it really easy for me as your supporter to sign up, to tell my story, and to fundraise. And also, who doesn't love a little bit of a competition and sense of accomplishment? So give folks bragging rights. Think about incentives to anybody that raises, to anybody that gets at least one gift to their page this week will be entered maybe in a contest to do something fun with our organization. Or maybe when I've reached 50% of my fundraising goal, that's a great milestone, maybe I get a really fun badge added to my page. Think about ways to gamify the peer-to-peer experience for participants to encourage them and put them in a winning state of mind. So as an example here on how easy a registration process can be, This is a Kimbia client. This is from a YMCA peer-to-peer campaign. And here, as you can see on the screen, it says sign up to become a campaigner. And we are asking for 4 items of information: your first name, your last name, your email, and the name of the branch on whose behalf you'd like to raise money. That's it. With those 4 pieces of information and submit, the person is registered. They have their personal fundraising page. They have a personal fundraising center where they can do all sorts of things. And we've provided them information about next steps. Again, this is just one example, and this is an example of how Kimvia's works, but the point here is how simple and easy it should be for your supporters to engage with you in a peer-to-peer campaign.
Great. So the next one is seek first to understand, then to be understood. And so the way I want to illustrate this is I want to take us a little bit outside of the peer-to-peer fundraising world, and I want to think about peer-to-peer in the sense of literature. So that's why I have the picture there of E.B. White's Charlotte's Web. And, you know, Charlotte saves Wilbur's life by spinning inspirational messages on her web, and then she gets Fern and Templeton to come along and help. So I really believe this is one of the first examples of peer-to-peer, not necessarily fundraising, but maybe peer-to-peer crowd spinning, bringing people to the table to help save something. And it was also a really meaningful story. The story has stuck with me. And so when you think about this habit, what your participant needs comes first. So putting in that compelling storytelling. Peer-to-peer fundraising helps scale relationships, building by tapping into your current supporters' respective networks, their friends, family, and colleagues. So what is going to matter to the participant to be able to push that forward? So in some cases, your organization agenda will need to come second, and I know that can be difficult, but it's definitely something to keep in mind as an effective habit. And then tell the story of your participant, not your organization. So that's, again, going back to Charlotte's Web, that's basically what Charlotte was doing for Wilbur. She was telling the story of Wilbur rather than thinking about herself. And so when we move forward into how we seek first to understand, this habit can become really great across all the other ones. They can speak to all other habits. And I wanted to give you one example that was not in the space of St. Baldrick's and Charity Water, because those are always used as really great examples of storytelling, and they do storytelling fantastic. But here's one that I recently came across, Pelotonia, which is the bike ride. They're in one of the top 30 programs for peer-to-peer, and they take place with The Ohio State University. And they have this really great spot on their website that captures warrior stories. And then when I signed up for their bike ride to get their email communications, they were using these warrior stories throughout their email communications, and they were super, super meaningful. So are you doing the right kind of story banking to understand what the needs are of your audience and then pulling those into your communication? And then the next habit, Synergize, which is probably one of my favorite because I think it's one that is left out the most. This is not an external habit. This is not something that is about your participants, but it's about the habit of creative cooperation. It is teamwork, open-mindedness, and the adventure of finding new solutions to old problems. And that is actually directly from the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And so this is about the people that are on your team. I think it's really important that you make sure you know who is on your team and utilize their skills internally for those externally. So do you have someone that really loves to do social media? Put them on social media. Do you have someone that works really great in the database, but she also wants to learn how to help motivate team captains? Are you giving the right kind of professional development? Is your team synergized and set up in a way that your peer-to-peer program can be the most successful that it can be? And I think sometimes this is really a skipped step within peer-to-peer, that as much as we want to focus on external, let's take a step back and look at the internal.
Great, and finally we have Sharpen the Saw. So you've done your peer-to-peer campaign, you've seen how things go, you've analyzed, you've figured out what worked and what didn't, but you need to sharpen your saw. You're going to do this again. Hopefully you had a successful campaign, And it's important to consider a couple of best practices when thinking about the future. First, be aware of how the peer-to-peer space is changing. As Colleen was just telling us a little bit ago, maybe 10 years ago, we were all mailing out letters and recruiting people, and we had these sign-up forms where we were walking around, more neighbor-like programs. And now it's as easy peasy in some cases as 4 steps to sign up. Stay up to date on industry best practices. Now we all say, hey, it's really important to consider milestones, and it's really important to coach your fundraisers and teach them how to do all these things for you. At some point, there was one person that tried that and found out that it worked. So we are constantly evolving. Mobile, as I mentioned, is becoming a huge piece of this pie. So just because we felt like we maybe were at the pinnacle of what was the best practice of peer-to-peer a couple of years ago, doesn't mean we shouldn't keep looking and we shouldn't keep learning and talking to our peers, and importantly, testing and trying new things. We're never going to learn if we don't test and evolve. And of course, review results and optimize for next year. So you're coming off your campaign and it feels like before you've even had time or room to breathe, you've got to start planning next year's. Use the data that you have, and don't be scared of the data that may not be, a rosy picture. If you found out that, that at least 70% of the people that maybe signed up to be a peer-to-peer fundraiser for you didn't actually raise any money, hey, that's a really great starting point to say to yourself, why? Did I not make it easy enough for them? Did I not send them emails? Maybe the people that I targeted didn't really care. Maybe I automatically registered them for peer-to-peer fundraising when they gave me a donation, and that inflated my numbers. There's all sorts of reasons, and you can learn from that to build a bigger, better program. One example of an organization that's currently evaluating and looking and learning and figuring out what they're going to do next and sharpening their saw is KLRU, which is our local PBS station here in Austin. This past summer, they decided to try to replace an on-air fundraising membership drive with a digital-only peer-to-peer campaign. They put their toe in the water. They said, we're going to try to raise $50,000. We're going to see what happens. As you can see from the results, they actually almost doubled their goal. They raised $94,000, and they learned a lot of lessons, and now they're sharpening their saw for future campaigns. For example, one of the things that they learned, and they were right to do so in the first place, was that the goal, the suggested goal for their fundraisers was about $250. They didn't really have an idea or a point of view on where they should put that money, how they should set that bar, and they didn't want people to be turned off by the potential goal. What we found out after this campaign is that the average raise per fundraiser was significantly higher than the suggested goal of $250. That's great. We're taking that learning and we're applying it to the next campaign to make sure that the suggested goal is more in line. So this is just one great example of ways that you can sharpen your saw and think about ways to do things next year. And on that note, again, we would just like to remind you that if after you've listened to or viewed this webinar you have any questions, please feel free to email us. Our contact information is right here. Is right here. My personal contact information and Colleen's, as well as ours here at Kimbia and Charity Dynamics. You can also always tweet us, and if you have questions about our webinars, for example, you can use the hashtag Kimbia webinars. Also, Kelly here would like me to tell everybody about a webinar next month.
So Miriam was mentioning about KLRU, and if anyone's interested in learning more about that, we do have a webinar next month, and we would love for you guys to attend that as well.
And the way to find out about that is on Kimbia.com?
Yes, under the webinars, and we'll send out the information.
And Colleen and Lindsay, if you would like to mention to anybody any fun, cool webinars, because I know you guys are always doing fun things that you have coming up.
There will be, we haven't scheduled a webinar coming up, but we did send out our walk registration benchmark today, which also can be found online on charitydynamics.com. So it just goes through what's the benchmark of during steps of registration, and it's super informative. I think right now a lot of people are thinking about 2016 and what's happening within registration.
Wonderful. Well, Thank you, ladies from Charity Dynamics, for joining us today and sharing your wonderful expertise and insight. And we hope that folks that have a chance to view or listen to this webinar presentation will check back with both our organizations for more fun and exciting industry-leading research. Have a great day, everybody.